Last time on Motherland Fort Salem, the military is incompetent or malicious. The American government has been undermined by witch hunters, somehow. Mass murder and terrorist organization, the spree turn out to be hypocrites, and our host is falling into despair trying to talk about characters. So tune in and subscribe, like, comment, and turn on the bell notifications. The best place to start talking about characters is at the very end of Season 2 on the last episode called Revolution Part 1. After the attack on the military base by the Camarilla, Alder has lost all her biddies and has partially turned into wood. On her deathbed, she asks to see the Bellweather unit, and so the main protagonists of the show start saying their goodbyes.
I spent my whole life looking up to you. You showed me what it means to be a leader. To follow one's will for better and for worse. And don't worry. We're gonna be just as hard on my mom.
Let us stop here and revert back to Season 1, Episode 1. Abigail Bellweather's journey starts at the rooftop. Intended or not, it is interesting that she is shown in the very first scene above everyone. Not only that, she immediately uses her powers to push what I assume is her human boyfriend to leave her alone and go to college. By the way, pushing someone is a war crime, and Abigail tells that to her mother, who is head of witch military intelligence. Like I said, the show often forgets things. Anyway, Abigail sees herself above everyone, and given her power, she is above everyone. At the same time, the pressure from her mother and family line is very much felt in these first few episodes. Abigail's mother, Petra Bellweather, is a high-ranking military officer. She expects nothing more than perfection from Abigail. So Abigail is constantly swinging between arrogance and submission, which makes her one of the more interesting characters in the show. She's someone that has power physically, and she also has political power with just her name alone, but also constantly feels the need to prove herself. There's also a little bit of conflict with the other girls, but those get resolved pretty quickly, so I don't think it's worth talking about. Season 1 is more about breaking down Abigail. She's shown that there are people that are stronger than her, there are things she cannot do, and while in the first half of the season she seems detached from relationships with men, her encounter with Tareem Adil starts to open her up. It is more of a case of a love at first sight than a relationship that develops over time, but nevertheless they seem to complete each other. Abigail shows that the ideology of the Tareem of absolute passivity is flawed, and Adil shows Abigail nothing. I lied to you, they don't complete each other. The idea of pacifism actually gets completely dismantled in the show. The Tareem got slaughtered not because the Camarilla had technology or was stronger, but because they refused to fight. Even Khalida, who is kind of a young priestess of the Tareem, has to eventually give up on the absolute pacifism once her brother is about to die. Abigail just goes balls to the wall when she finally attacks the Camarilla, which is understandable. And Abigail herself is an interesting case of a character walking in circles. Ever since the Camarilla attack in Season 1, she has been spiraling down into a hole of self-doubt, culminating her almost losing her life for the second time after she was tricked into a garage, which is stupid by the way. In Season 2 she gets further down the rabbit hole because Raelle and Tally have developed special powers and she has none. Instead, she's being encouraged by the Imperatrix, kind of a witch matchmaker, to marry the boyfriend of her dead ex-nemesis Libba, which is an interesting story on its own. Libba and Abigail are from two rival families and they are basically constantly bullying each other. They might not necessarily hate each other, but their relationship is defined by that family feud. The thing is that in the same episode that the show tries to make them understand each other, they kill off Libba. It is a thing that the show does often. They will take a character that is shown in a negative light earlier and try to redeem that character with one of the main characters. It is especially cheap here, since in the same episode that they pulled the redemption trick, they also kill her off. The death of Libba has a little payoff with Abigail having her speech that impresses everyone, but at that point all I could think about how the show just used Libba as a cheap death to make our main characters feel bad. Eventually everything returns back to normal though. Abigail starts being arrogant again, and while she doesn't have special powers, it is shown that she has a very strong aptitude for weather work. By the way, there's nothing wrong with characters having a circular character development, but in a show that wants to touch on topics as discrimination and slavery, you would expect characters to change according with the events. So, coming back to what Abigail says to Alder.
I spent my whole life looking up to you.
That is something Tally would say, Abigail is shown to look up more to Bellweather, but never really to Alder. I think Abigail respects Alder's authority, but that's how far it goes.
You showed me what it means to be a leader. To follow one's will for better and for worse. And don't worry. We're gonna be just as hard on my mom.
What did Alder actually do as a leader? Send untrained witches to die? Brought our main characters on a suicide mission that almost killed all of them? Committed a war crime by puppeteering the president and is partially responsible for the existence of the spree? All of this is known by Abigail, by the way. If Alder is the example of a leader, then I'm worried about Abigail. And while it sounds like something Abigail would say, it really doesn't mesh well with the reality of the show, does it?
You pushed me to look inside myself, to dare to face my darkness. And if you hadn't, I wouldn't have learned how to use the witch bomb, and last night would have gone very differently. So thank you.
Raelle's journey starts at the so-called session. It is not very clear in the show what the session is, but it seems to be a place in America that just goes from north to south and is maybe related to witches. Anyways, we see Raelle entering her home, turning off the TV for her father, and then healing an old lady that is very thankful not only for her service to the country, since Raelle will be joining the army soon, but also thankful that she is healing what looks like skin cancer. Raelle comes from a line of healers, and from this interaction we do get the impression that she does care about lives, be they human or witch. This is also reinforced during the show several times. She tries to heal someone that committed suicide and feels bad about not being able to save them. She heals Khalida, affected by a plague that only affects witches, knowing that it could kill her. She heals a little Tarim boy affected by the same plague. She basically sacrifices herself for that same boy, and whenever there's someone in danger, she just goes off no matter the cost. Raelle might be blunt, unapologetically impolite, and almost to a dangerous degree brave, but she's, even with her flaws, what you would consider a hero. Anyways, in the first episode, Raelle has a death wish. She wants to fail basic training and be deployed early on war lines to die in a glorious death. It is made very clear that if your unit fails as well, therefore you would also be pulling your unit into early death as well. So this character that is shown to care about human life just wants to die and bring everyone with her. And why exactly? Well, her mom died in battle as a soldier. A mom she barely knew and has very little to no attachment. She's going to just kill herself, not taking into regard her dad, someone that has been literally there for her entire life, is shown to care very much about her, just accepts that she's gay and seems to be extremely proud of his daughter, but I guess Raelle just forgets about all of that. Fortunately for us, Raelle finds her sense again after she falls in love. Her drill sergeant Anacostia does make it clear again that if she fails, other people also fail. That means if she dies, the other people will also die. Also, Raelle's girlfriend, Scylla, makes it clear that the way out of the army is getting stronger, but I don't think any of those things have any effect on Raelle. Raelle's just madly in love with Scylla, and if Scylla said something, she would do it. So, after the first episode, Raelle, even though she just sometimes leaves training and goes unpunished, is a good soldier that follows orders and is trying to fit in. Even initial problems with a unit are quickly smoothed out, and the girls do eventually become friends. Raelle in the first episode is more defined by her relationship with Scylla. Most of the episodes concern her and Scylla either smoothing previous problems out or finding new things to make them clash. The most prevalent clash is in season 1 episode 3 when the boyfriend of Scylla arrives and makes it clear to Raelle that Scylla has more secrets than she believed. Of course, Scylla doesn't tell Raelle the truth, and finally Scylla forces her ex-boyfriend into suicide. By the way, that is also the person that Raelle tries to save, and since healing someone makes an involuntary mental connection to the victim, she has visions of Scylla and the ex-boyfriend meeting each other and Scylla putting a spell on him. Raelle suspects that Scylla did something, gets the suspicion confirmed by the best side character in the entirety of the show, and then just believes Scylla, which is understandable. Raelle is madly in love with Scylla. You could say she's blinded by love.
Here we go! Not funny! Different rap!
And it finally comes out that Scylla is not only spree but also impersonated another person to push Raelle towards her. Raelle finally sees that even though Scylla might love her, their relationship is based on lies and deception, finally culminating her in symbolically beating up Scylla and therefore ending the relationship. By season 2, Raelle knows that Scylla is a mass-murdering sociopath and in her mind has ended the relationship. We, the audience, even get the extra information that Scylla kills someone with a pen towards the brain, and she designs a new spell that takes away people's bodily autonomy, which might be a worse fate than death. The show wants me to believe that Scylla is remorseful about her acts, but accomplishes that by introducing a worse villain than the Spree. Scylla is still a mass-murdering sociopath. She killed a fuck ton of people in a terrorist attack by forcing them to kill themselves. She kills an ex-boyfriend by forcing him into suicide because she either thinks that he is going to rat her out or ruin her chances with Raelle. She kills someone with a pencil to the brain, which is exceptionally bad since she is basically taking away somebody's parents and basically creating more Camarilla. You would expect from someone that got both parents taken away to be a bit more mindful who you kill, but who cares? Now, the guy she killed was a piece of shit, kidnapped a child and tried to kill it, but you know, you could have reported them to the fucking police. And if you think the police is untrustworthy, Scylla was together with a member of the army called an Akostja on this mission, so I don't quite understand why after the mission was over, everyone present at the secret meeting where they wanted to stone a literal child to death was arrested by the army. There's literally a soldier present as an eyewitness. I guess they just wanted to have Scylla coldly kill the mustache-twirling supervillain, and that kill probably created another Camarilla member in the long run. Also, again, she takes away bodily autonomy from humans with a new spell, as she literally tries that weapon of war on a random townspeople because she can, I guess. It's a great redemption, by the way. The reason why I like Scylla and why the audience likes her is probably because Amalia is such a great, charismatic person, which adds to her psychotic nature under further inspection. There's no redemption for Scylla. She still belongs in prison after all of this is over, and what does Raelle do? She gets back together with Scylla, even though season 2 is all about Raelle starting to understand that the army, even with its flaws, it's still better than the alternative and that there are bigger threats out there. Raelle gets physically stronger, but also is made very clear that her priorities have shifted. While she might still be in love with Scylla, she realizes that her powers are needed elsewhere to protect which kind. She's learning that sometimes you have to confront your inner demons and bring sacrifice to the greater good, also mirrored in her final speech to Alder.
You pushed me to look inside myself, to dare to face my darkness. And if you hadn't, I would have learned how to use the witch bomb, and last night would have gone very differently. So thank you.
The whole development of Raelle realizing that even though you love someone, if a relationship is based on lies and deception, it is better to let go, is just reverted back right to the beginning where Raelle didn't know that Scylla was a mass-murdering sociopath. All the character development making it clear that Raelle has grown as a person and has realized that not everything is how it seems, just snapped away because people really like Raelle and Scylla. Ultimately, why the idea of a rebel turning into a soldier of the Call of Duty is interesting, the show just fumbles it hard by trying to redeem a mass murder through Raelle by pressing the reset button on their completely broken relationship. And that is something the show does a lot.
You told me to follow the truth, no matter where it led. But I don't think either of us could imagine it could lead us here. I may never understand some of the choices you've made, but I am beginning to understand the burden that those choices placed on you. And I don't know how you carried it for all these years, but I want you to know that you can set it down now. We will carry it from here. Thank you.
Tally is introduced to us as someone that does not need to enter the military. Nevertheless, she feels the duty to serve, and what inspires her are the spree attacks. Which or not, innocent people getting killed will probably inspire anyone to do their part if they are able to. So despite her mother having found a way out of the military for Tally, and Tally being told for years how awful the army is, she still joins. Tally is then surprised that the military is actually not that great. Tally throughout the show seems to be one thing and one thing only: naive. with an extreme sense of duty. She's often portrayed as the younger sister to Abigail and Raelle. Her lack of experience in the real world makes her vulnerable, but at the same time her curiosity makes her stronger throughout the show, to the point that she develops an ability called sonic vision, which allows her to basically see sound. I would say from all the main characters, Tally's the most consistent of them all. In the beginning, Tally believes that the military is a great institution that is fighting for justice, and she feels at home with more witches around, even though she has been told by her mom for years that the military is a horrible place. Her new experiences, especially at Beltane, that's the witch orgy, do not only give her life experience but also more power. In the finale of season 1, she even sacrificed herself to become a biddy for Alder. A biddy is kind of a human battery to keep someone else alive. The show, not wanting to have old Tally though, of course immediately reverts that back with the consequence of her and Alder still having connection, which also gets cut down as soon as it has served its purpose. The show really hates consequences sometimes. In season 2, Tally's curiosity leads her to figuring out that Alder has been keeping a secret. It turns out that the leader of the spree was former military officer serving directly under Alder. Of course, after finding it out, Tally confronts Alder, and Alder's of course pissed that a cadet that barely passed basic training would question her actions and accuse her of such things. The problem is that indeed the spree was founded by a former military officer called Nictor Batan. Tally, in her naivety, thinks that if everyone knew about Alder and Nictor, that the world is magically going to change, but of course that's just a pipe dream. Anyways, Nictor was former military, and it is Alder's actions that led to Nictor founding the spree, but that still doesn't justify the killing of innocent humans. If you dive even a little bit deeper, there are further problems with Tally's thinking than we realize. In a mission somewhere in Liberia, Alder uses the spell bomb that was invented by Nictor to kill rebels after they have already surrendered. This is a war crime under Hague Relations 1899, Article 23C, that prohibits to kill or wound an enemy who, having laid down arms or having no longer means of defense, has surrendered at discretion. Nictor could just take Alder to court and probably usurp her as a commander of the army, so even if Tally knew what Alder did, she should still be asking herself why Nictor just didn't take Alder to court. Another thing is that Nictor was part of the military, so she should know that witches that dodge military service get hunted and killed, so why would you suddenly care about conscription after you had killed many in combat and probably have experienced other witches getting killed by other witches? Was taking out the rebel group so traumatizing that Nictor decided to kill a fuck ton of humans that had nothing to do with the conflict? And isn't that a bit hypocritical of Nictor that she just judges Alder for killing rebels that have surrendered, which is a war crime by the way, but Nictor and the spree themselves kill out of combat innocent civilians that don't have any means of defense? I don't know, man. While from the outside perspective I can believe that Tally is naive enough to believe Nictor's hypocritical statements, it is still weird to me that nobody else in this world seems to make any connection whatsoever. Tally goes so far that she defends Nictor from being executed by invoking the right of proxy, and that one is really interesting. The right of proxy reads as follows: in order to preserve the dignity of life and protect the falsely accused and or innocent, a witness who is certain of the innocence of the accused may invoke the right of proxy. This clause allows a witness to offer their life in place of the accused. So the right of proxy doesn't work here because the accused is by their own admission not innocent. Tally can't even invoke the right of proxy because she also wasn't a witness. The show goes a step further and allows others before Tally gets killed by Alder to invoke the right of proxy, which is again not possible since Tally is not the accused. The right of proxy gets turned into a joke even though the show sets it up in a language lesson in the very first episode of season 2 only to trigger it here. You know how sometimes an authority or a villain will ask, who is X person? And then suddenly people will come forward and say, I'm X person. And that is how the right of proxy is used here. It is such a cliche and missed opportunity at the same time. It is almost like the show is afraid of consequences. First they make Tally old, just to revert her back immediately. Then they give Tally and Alder a connection, just to break them up as soon as it has served its purpose. Then they put Tally in mortal danger, just to box her out with one of the most cliche tropes to ever exist in storytelling. It is so frustrating that the main characters seem to have the heaviest of plot armor to ever exist. And there's one thing that really grinds my gears. They use Tally to redeem Nictor to a certain extent. After the Camarilla attack on Fort Salem, where 3 main characters had to kill the VP's daughter, they are held prisoners together with Nictor, cause apparently killing a person to save an entire military base is a crime, somehow. There, Nictor starts to think about how her actions actually might have been wrong, and that she might have been responsible for the revival of the Camarilla. Tally says,
You did what you believed was right. So did Alder. So did we when we killed Penn.
The show is using Tally, who is the most innocent of the 3 main characters, to equate the actions of Alder, who committed war crimes, and the actions of our heroes, who killed a person to save hundreds and thousands of witches, to the actions of a mass murderer. These actions are not even closely related, yet the show really wants to convince you of that. If you come back to what Tally says to Alder, some of it starts to seem odd.
You told me to follow the truth, no matter where it led. But I don't think either of us could imagine it would lead us here.
That is probably the direct opposite. Alder specifically told Tally to stay away from things she doesn't understand.
I may never understand some of the choices you've made, but I am beginning to understand the burden that those choices placed on you.
While the first part is in line with what we know about Tally, she should know the burden of the choices Alder made. After all, she's an Alder superfan, as shown throughout the whole series. Her mom told about the horror stories of the military for years, and I assume even the normal history books should teach about witch conflicts, since those are also American conflicts.
I don't know how you carried it for all these years, but I want you to know that you can set it down now. We will carry it from here. Thank you.
This line does bring out the Tally from the first episode, assuring her, basically hero, that they will take the torch and carry it. Of course, this is incredibly naive since 3 cadets are probably not enough to change things, but that would be in line with Tally's character. An unquestionable positive attitude, naivety, and a sense of duty. So while characters in the show don't seem to evolve, they still go through arcs. They're very circular sometimes, to its detriments, but an arc nonetheless. I chose to dive into the 3 main characters, but every character in the show is interesting to me. Even the bodyguard that was there for 1 episode. And while the main characters develop in a more circular manner, there's one specific character that has a very drastic arc, I would say.
I am General Sarah Alder. Welcome to Fort Salem.
Sarah Alder, last witch of her line and 300-year-old general of the witch military army of the United States. She literally saved all of witchkind and stopped witch hunting by promising humans to fight their wars for them. As far as the show is concerned, she has done this very successfully, even though the show wants to have its cake and eat it too. Sarah Alder is introduced to us as the most important witch in the army. She's the one that welcomes the new recruits. Everyone seems to look up to her except Raelle, that little rebel. And the actress herself is so commanding that I actually really thought I was in the presence of a general. We get this authority confirmed after Abigail tries to get out of the unit since Raelle has a death wish, and Alder basically beats her down with words and tells Abigail to piss off. Alder is no joke, and she doesn't like when her authority is questioned. It feels like there's also some underlying hate towards the humans with the demeaning use of the word civilian, but that is understandable. They almost killed her by hanging, and they killed her entire family. I would also hate humans if a group of them hunted my kind. Hey, it's almost like there's a parallel between the spree and the military. Witches were hunted by humans and dodgers are being hunted by witches. The military fights wars for the humans, and the spree commit mass murder on innocent out-of-combat civilians and babies. Well, maybe the parallel doesn't work that well, but it is one. Throughout the show, Alder becomes more and more extreme, basically becoming more and more unhinged. While in the first few episodes she doesn't like that her authority is questioned, towards the end of the season she literally commits a war crime by puppeteering the president during her speech to give herself absolute power to act how she wants. By the way, that is not how political decisions are made. If political decisions were made during presidential speeches, I would have to ask the question how the fuck the spree have not tried to puppeteer the president to get rid of conscription instead of committing mass murder for more than 20 years with no clear goal or manifesto. Anyways, Logic aside, that is a war crime since characters in-universe mention that puppeteering is outlawed by The Hague. The Hague is basically a world accord that determines what witchcraft can be used in conflict and what would be considered a war crime. The Hague has also a real-life equivalent that is also called The Hague, and they also are responsible for making laws about military conflict and incarcerating war crimes. So by the show's own logic, Alder commits a war crime, and not only does one of the most trusted lieutenants, Anacostia, directly observe that, Petra Bellweather, head of intelligence, and Abigail's mother finds that out, our three main characters know that, and the fucking president of the fucking United States of course knows that because she was literally puppeteered. How the fuck is Alder still walking at large? Either Anacostia, Petra, Abigail, Raelle, and Tally are completely incompetent, or they don't want to change anything. Report the war crime to the fucking Hague. The Hague exists, the characters mention the Hague, they know what it is, why does nobody in this universe report war crimes? Especially Petra Bellweather, head of military intelligence, the one person shown to not like Alder very much. She literally wants Alder's position. If the show didn't want the main characters to have a clear, obvious cure-all solution, then they shouldn't introduce an obvious cure-all solution to the fucking problem. And the president? The president only comes back to Alder in season 2, and then she gets pushed by Alder, which is another war crime by the way. Is the president an incompetent moron? It's insane. You have so many characters involved in this Alder situation, and she's still comfortably sitting as the general of the army, and only by the end of the second season does she lose her seat after they manage to capture the spree leader, even though they don't actually have a leader because they act as independent cells, but they also have a leadership somehow. The show doesn't make it very clear. You get my frustration with the show? Every fucking time I try to write about something in the show, it dissolves itself in other things that either don't make sense, make characters incompetent, malicious, corrupt, or just straight out evil, and it's just insanity. The thing is that I'm just scraping the surface here yet again. The show even tries sometimes to tell you that humans hate witches, and they also specifically don't like Alder, but just for context. Witches have been defending humans for 300 years. 300 very long and very successful years. For most of those 300 years, humans did not need to send anyone into war. There are probably history books describing all the successful wars Sarah Alder has led and won. Humans should be praising Sarah Alder as an undying witch queen and be eternally thankful that they don't need to defend their country with humans. The show really tried its hardest to paint the picture that people hate witches, but how can you hate them if you have 300 years of history of witches fighting human wars and winning? The American government should be thankful that they have witches on their side trying to get rid of the spree, and yet the show tries so hard to make this conflict between humans and witches. It doesn't work. Sometimes people look at witches weirdly in the show. In season 2, they even make it more clear by having the most forceful scene where humans make fun of witches loudly in a bar, mocking them for having several husbands, and then having the human just literally committing battery on a dill. While the several husbands thing is a problem with its own for a show that's constantly reminding you that they don't have enough witches, what are the humans actually mocking the witches for? Polygamy? Also, given that witches have been protecting humans for more than 300 years, witch history should be in normal history books, right? The show literally confirms this by having a character talking about the witch and how it was taught in 4th grade. Humans should have a fairly big understanding on how witch society works, especially if you have an undying witch queen being present for literally 300 years. Also, why did a human just punch a dill? You know, a witch could kill you with a single breath. This is as stupid as punching a nuke. Like many other characters in the show, I can only assume that this guy is just a moron and is not representative of any other human in the world. This also seems to be a core issue for me in the show. Every time I talk about one thing, I have to mention 3 other things that are attached to it that don't make sense, make everyone look completely incompetent, unhinged, or just malicious as hell. Alder was just the best character to talk about all of those things, because while Alder does change over time, becoming more controlling and eventually falling to her own hubris, it is everything in between that makes me ask questions after questions after questions. I'm sure you can find ad hoc responses to all of those, but I'm relatively sure that the writers have never thought about any of this. They probably thought about the broad strokes of the characters and where they should end, but they did not think about the history and what that would imply for the wider world. I like the show. I like the show very much. but the show is a mess. It is constantly trying to have its cake, eat it, and then forgetting that there was a cake to begin with. The spree are mass murderers that kill babies, but they also just want to end conscription somehow, so that should be fine, I guess. The military is supposed to be slavery, but at the same time they're retired military personnel and legal dodgers. The Camarilla are just mustache-twirling supervillains that apparently have undermined every single human institution, which is insane for a group that literally has nothing to cling on since witches have been fighting human wars for 300 years. Humans are literally just thought about when they want to make it clear that humans hate witches. It is again insane since witches have been defending them for literally 300 years. The show has cheap deaths like Libba. The show tries to redeem mass murderers by resetting relationships. The show tries to redeem mass murderers by making a good guy equate literal war crimes and mass murder to the completely justified killing of a singular person. The show is constantly confused, forgetting things that happened previously and just ignoring 300 years of history for the sake of the story. And I still like it. Yeah, it's not a well thought out show. There are many small holes that form a giant whole. There's not one plot hole. There are several small flaws in the world building. You could say there's a lot of wasted potential in the show. And maybe someday we will get a similar thing that is more well thought out and better done. Like the writers of the show, I am not the best writer, but I like them, try my best, and I would love to be rewarded for that. So pay me money on Patreon, otherwise I will curse you. Subscribe, take care of yourselves, and have a nice, wonderful day.